When is a boomer not a boomer? Today I thought I would just talk a little bit about this thought I've been having lately, and I'm calling this, when is a boomer not a boomer? And I know that it's the in thing to piss on boomers. A lot of people are upset with boomers for various reasons. And boomers have their faults, but so does every generation as far as that goes. But the thing is, a lot of people try to blame boomers for like the current economy or, house prices being insane or all kinds of different stuff. But I think a lot of times they're getting blamed for stuff that actually happened like before them. So for example, maybe a lot of people are upset about income taxation in general, and like the Federal Reserve and stuff like that. But that wasn't started by boomers. The income tax and the Fed began well over 100 years ago with Wilson and the progressives, so that's not the boomers' fault. Or maybe, a lot of millennials and Gen Z, they complain about Social Security, and I understand that. I think Social Security is, I dislike it because of coercion. But the thing is, you can't pin that on the boomers either. You can thank FDR for Social Security and other government programs that he enacted during the Depression and thereafter. And some might blame boomers for like the welfare state and so on. Again, the boomers had nothing to do with that. It was LBJ in the 60s that implemented the welfare state. So while there's plenty to criticize boomers about, not everything is their fault. So I wanted to make that comment. And also, just the whole idea of stereotyping people, that bothers me. I mean, because, like I said, a lot of people say, oh, that's typical boomer. It's a boomer mentality. And really, you're basing it on stereotypes. When is a boomer not a boomer? Not every boomer is a boomer, okay? Just because you're born in a certain time frame, that doesn't mean that you're a boomer. And the stereotypes are really not fair. I mean, it does nobody any good to say all boomers are blah, 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 any more than it would be helpful to say all millennials are blah, 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 or all Gen Xers are blah, 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 or all Gen Zers are blah, blah, blah. I mean, you wouldn't say that about like racial groups or ethnic groups, would you? So why do you think that it's okay to paint with a broad brush just because it's generational? So I think the problem with that attitude is that it feeds into this idea that, or not even an idea, I don't know who's behind it, but it feeds into this current zeitgeist of dividing society and dividing people in society. And I think part of the reason for that is because when you have people fighting against each other, it's easier for the powers that be to get away with stuff, to anytime you can promote infighting among your enemy, so to speak, that's helpful for you. So we do ourselves no favor by pitting generation against generation, or race against race, or ethnicity against ethnicity. So I would say, let's not do that. And the final comment that I wanted to make was that, and this is really what got me started about it. Now, when people say boomer, they usually think of somebody like Bill Clinton or Al Gore or George Bush Jr. And they're certainly of the boomer generation, but the thing is, if that's your idea or your mental image of what a boomer is, boomers have, everybody thinks that boomers are sitting on big fat 401ks and they got houses worth, hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars. That's a stereotype. Not everyone's like that. I have to constantly shift here because the sun is moving. Yeah, not everybody's like that. And the thing is, when you think of like Al Gore or somebody like that, you're thinking of older boomers at the beginning of the so-called baby boom. But baby boom actually extends to like 1964, give or take. I mean, depending on who you talk to, but generally 64. And I think Gen X, they reckon it as starting as 1965, although there's some leeway there. But my point is that the experience of those born at the end of the baby boom is very different from the experience of those born at the beginning of the baby boom. So what I call older boomers and younger boomers. And I'm what I would categorize as a younger boomer. So technically, I'm a boomer, but there's a vast difference. There's a huge age difference between the older boomers and the younger boomers. And not only that, there's just a huge life experience difference between the two also. Because like if you think of like the hippies during the 60s and the college protests and Vietnam War protests and Kent State and all that, the boomers, the hippies that participated in that, they were college age. Late 60s, early 70s, us younger boomers, we were in grade school. We weren't out protesting. We weren't out, with the summer of love or anything like that. We're too young. So it's a different mindset, really, even though we're both labeled, and I hate labels, but we're both labeled as boomers. Very different. So older boomers, they're going to remember the assassination of JFK. Us younger boomers, we have no memory. We're too young. We're babies when Kennedy was assassinated. Very different experience. Also, people like to rag on the boomers for, you had such a great economy and houses were cheap and education was cheap and so on. Well, part of that's due to inflation anyhow. But the thing is, not all boomers benefited from, I guess what I want to say is the later boomers or the younger boomers, they didn't have the same benefits. They didn't enjoy the same circumstances as the older boomers. In a lot of ways, we got the hand-me-downs from the older boomers, not just with clothes and stuff like that, but also we got hand-me-down jobs and we got a hand-me-down economy. Because like by the time that I got out of college, it wasn't easy to get a job. I know it's not easy now, and believe me, I know, and it's lousy, and I really empathize with Gen Xers or millennials or Gen Z or whoever, is trying to find a job in this market. And frankly, if I had it to do over again, I would probably seriously consider, self-employment or something like that. But, it's too late for me at this point. That ship has already sailed. But I'm just saying, it's for over 50 years, 40 years at least, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been a paradise in terms of finding jobs or anything like that. So, it's not fair to lump all boomers together and say, oh, you had it so easy and we have it so rough. Every generation faces its trials and tribulations. There's always stuff that, life happens. And there's car coming. Yeah, so there's always something that comes up. There's always something to bemoan or say, I wish things were better. Yeah, so I'm a boomer, but I'm not a boomer. And the other thing I think I would add is that with being a younger boomer, in a sense, I think it's kind of forgotten. We're kind of forgotten. We're a so-called Generation Jones, and we're squeezed between the older boomers and Gen X. We don't really fit with the older boomers because they have a very different experience, but we're not quite Gen X either. I mean, personally, I would probably identify more with Gen X, but I don't know. The problem is when we try to pigeonhole everybody, and that doesn't help anyone. And especially if we want to build a better society, if we want to build a better economy, one that works for everyone, we've got to stop this nonsense of my tribe versus your tribe. So I'll just leave you with that. And I hope that I've given you something to think about. And I would appreciate it if I did give you something to think about, please give this video a thumbs up, like it, subscribe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.